Beneath the surface of daily transactions, an invisible financial empire dictates the flow of global wealth. It's a system so vast, yet so opaque, that few truly grasp its power. We are talking about the intertwined mechanisms of the Eurodollar market and the SWIFT banking network. Together, these entities don't just facilitate global trade, they control it, often operating beyond the reach of national governments. This isn't merely about economics, it's about the ultimate weapon of geopolitical dominance, a financial infrastructure that has shaped the modern world in ways most people never see. To understand this shadow system, we first need to define its core component, the Eurodollar. Contrary to its name, a Eurodollar has nothing to do with the euro currency or even necessarily Europe. According to financial historians, the term originated in the 1950s when Soviet banks, fearing US seizure of their dollar deposits, began holding them in London. In essence, a Eurodollar is simply a US dollar held as a deposit in a bank outside the United States, typically in a non-US branch of a US bank, or in any non-US bank. The genesis of the Eurodollar market is steeped in Cold War geopolitics. As documented by historians like Catherine R. Schenk, the Soviet Union, wary of its dollar assets being frozen during periods of heightened tension, sought a secure haven. London offered that refuge, a place where their dollars were beyond the direct regulatory purview of the Federal Reserve. This seemingly innocuous decision laid the groundwork for a vast, unregulated market that would eventually become an indispensable, albeit shadowy, part of global finance, growing exponentially far beyond its initial purpose. The critical distinction of Eurodollars lies in their regulatory status. Because these dollars are held in banks outside the US financial system, they are not subject to the same reserve requirements or interest rate regulations imposed by the Federal Reserve. This freedom from domestic oversight became a powerful incentive for both borrowers and lenders. Banks could offer more competitive interest rates on deposits and charge lower rates on loans, creating a lucrative arbitrage opportunity. This regulatory bypass fueled rapid growth, turning a niche solution into a global phenomenon. From those initial Soviet deposits, the Eurodollar market exploded. Financial academics estimate its size to be difficult to pin down precisely due to its opaque nature, but figures range wildly into the trillions. The Bank for International Settlements, or BIS, often tracks cross-border banking claims which provide a proxy for this market. While not strictly Eurodollars, these claims indicate a massive pool of dollars circulating globally outside direct US jurisdiction. This liquidity pool has become essential for global trade and finance, powering transactions across continents and industries without direct federal oversight. The Eurodollar market acts as a crucial engine for global lending. When a Japanese corporation needs dollars to purchase oil from Saudi Arabia, they often access these offshore dollar pools rather than directly borrowing from US banks subject to Federal Reserve rules. This bypass allows faster, cheaper access to liquidity. Investment banks, multinational corporations, and sovereign wealth funds all rely heavily on Eurodollars to finance their international operations, making it the de facto global currency for large-scale, cross-border transactions, powering commerce from Tokyo to Frankfurt. The independence of the Eurodollar market, while a source of its efficiency, also presents a profound systemic risk, the absence of a clear lender of last resort. In the US, the Federal Reserve steps in during a crisis to provide liquidity to banks. But who backs a Eurodollar bank facing a run? As the 2008 financial crisis painfully demonstrated, when offshore dollar funding dried up, the Federal Reserve had to reluctantly extend emergency swap lines to foreign central banks to inject liquidity into these markets, essentially becoming the global lender of last resort despite no direct mandate. While Eurodollars provide the liquidity, the SWIFT network provides the critical communication infrastructure. SWIFT, or the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, is not a bank itself, nor does it hold funds. Instead, it's a global cooperative society that provides a secure messaging network for financial institutions to send and receive information about financial transactions, like money transfers. Think of it as the world's most sophisticated and vital post office for banks, ensuring that trillions of dollars in value can be accurately and securely moved across borders every single day. SWIFT's reach is unparalleled. According to its own reported data, it connects over 11,000 financial institutions in more than 200 countries and territories. In 2022, SWIFT reported processing an average of 44.8 million messages per day. These messages are not actual money, but instructions for banks to debit or credit accounts. Without SWIFT, international financial transactions would revert to slow, error-prone, and incredibly insecure manual methods, grinding global trade to a halt. It is the silent, ubiquitous language of international banking, absolutely essential for global commerce. SWIFT is headquartered in Belgium and operates under Belgian law, but its governance structure reflects its global nature. It is a member-owned cooperative, meaning the banks that use it are also its shareholders. This structure was designed to ensure neutrality and protect it from undue influence from any single government or entity. However, as we'll explore, the reality of its global interconnectedness and reliance on major financial powers, particularly the US, means this neutrality is frequently challenged, especially when geopolitical tensions rise and sanctions are considered. The true power dynamic emerges when we view Eurodollars and SWIFT not as separate entities, but as two halves of a symbiotic global financial engine. Eurodollars create the pool of liquidity, the actual dollars circulating outside the US, while SWIFT provides the communication channels to direct these dollars from one offshore bank to another, facilitating trade, investment, and lending on a massive scale. One provides the what, the other provides the how. Without both, the current global financial system, as we know it, simply could not function. This Eurodollar-SWIFT nexus creates a financial system that inherently bypasses traditional national controls. Because Eurodollar transactions occur outside US jurisdiction, the Federal Reserve has no direct regulatory authority over them. Similarly, while SWIFT is based in Belgium, the vast majority of transactions it facilitates are in US dollars, giving the US government immense leverage. This dual bypass allows global capital to flow with fewer regulatory hurdles, enabling efficiency but also creating vulnerabilities and allowing for opaque activities, as highlighted by various financial watchdogs. The Eurodollar market is arguably the primary reason the US dollar maintains its status as the world's dominant reserve currency. Even as economists debate the future of the dollar, its role in the offshore market remains unassailable. Foreign central banks and commercial banks hold vast dollar reserves, and international trade is overwhelmingly invoiced and settled in dollars. This demand for dollars, largely facilitated by the Eurodollar system, ensures deep liquidity and stability, making it difficult for any other currency to truly challenge its global supremacy, according to reports from the International Monetary Fund. This brings us to the core of their geopolitical power. The ability to control or disrupt access to the Eurodollar market and the SWIFT network is arguably the most potent financial weapon in the modern world. When a nation is sanctioned, it's not just about restricting trade, it's about cutting off its access to the lifeblood of international finance. The US, by virtue of the dollar's dominance in the Eurodollar system and its leverage over SWIFT, can effectively turn off a country's ability to engage in global commerce, an immense power that has been deployed with increasing frequency. Perhaps the most well-known application of this financial leverage is against Iran. In 2012 and again in 2018, SWIFT disconnected Iranian banks from its network as part of international sanctions orchestrated primarily by the US. This action effectively isolated Iran from the vast majority of global finance, crippling its ability to export oil and import goods. While Europe attempted alternative mechanisms, the centrality of SWIFT-to-dollar transactions meant that disengagement had devastating economic consequences for the nation, impacting everything from food imports to medical supplies. More recently, following the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, several major Russian banks were disconnected from SWIFT. This move, coordinated by Western allies, aimed to severely impair Russia's financial operations and its ability to fund the war. While Russia had developed its own financial messaging system, SPFS, and strengthened ties with China's CIPS, the immediate impact was significant. Analysts from the International Institute for Strategic Studies noted the immediate shock to Russian trade and capital flows, although the long-term effectiveness continues to be debated as Russia seeks alternative financial channels. The use of SWIFT and the Eurodollar system as tools of foreign policy has led many nations to accuse the United States of weaponizing the dollar. While some argue this is a legitimate tool of statecraft, others contend it undermines the perceived neutrality and stability of the global financial system, potentially pushing countries towards de-dollarization. As geopolitical strategist Peter Zahan suggests, every time the US uses these financial levers, it forces other nations to seek alternatives, potentially eroding the very system that grants the US its unparalleled financial power. Estimating the exact size of the Eurodollar market is notoriously difficult, primarily due to its offshore, unregulated nature. The Bank for International Settlements provides international claims data, which includes Eurodollars, showing figures in the tens of trillions. However, these figures are indirect proxies. Differing methodologies lead to a wide range of estimates, with some analysts suggesting the total notional value of Eurodollar derivatives could push the broader shadow dollar market towards magnitudes like $500 trillion. This discrepancy highlights the market's opacity and the challenge of truly grasping its scale and potential systemic risks. One window into the market's expectations and scale is the Eurodollar futures market, traded on exchanges like the CME Group. These are interest rate futures contracts that track the 3-month LIBOR rate, a benchmark for short-term Eurodollar lending. The sheer volume of these contracts, representing trillions of dollars in underlying notional value, provides a sense of the market's depth and liquidity. Traders use them to hedge against interest rate risk and speculate on future rates, making it a crucial barometer for global dollar liquidity and the market's inherent expectations. The interplay between the offshore Eurodollar market and the onshore US dollar system is complex. While distinct, they are deeply interconnected. Changes in US monetary policy by the Federal Reserve, such as interest rate hikes, ripple through the Eurodollar market, affecting global borrowing costs. Conversely, stress in the Eurodollar market can spill over into the US, as seen in 2008 when the offshore dollar shortage threatened to destabilize US banks. This dynamic underscores how the shadow market is not truly separate, but rather a parallel dimension exerting profound influence on the official system. The weaponization of SWIFT has spurred rivals to emerge. China has developed the Cross-Border Interbank Payment System, or CIPS, aiming to facilitate international RMB payments. Europe has explored Instex, an instrument for supporting trade exchanges with Iran, designed to bypass US sanctions. Additionally, discussions around central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, often include the potential for direct international payments, circumventing existing intermediaries. While these alternatives are growing, they face significant hurdles in matching SWIFT's network effect and the dollar's liquidity, as noted by geopolitical strategists. When comparing CIPS and SWIFT, the scale difference is stark. While SWIFT processes tens of millions of messages daily connecting over 11,000 institutions, CIPS, though growing rapidly, still operates on a much smaller scale, primarily focused on RMB transactions. Analysts at the Atlantic Council suggest that CIPS is not designed to replace SWIFT entirely, but rather to create an alternative for China's expanding global trade and to mitigate US financial coercion. It's a strategic move to reduce reliance on the dollar-centric system, rather than a full-scale assault on SWIFT's messaging supremacy. Another layer of concern surrounds the privacy and surveillance capabilities embedded within this system. Although SWIFT prides itself on security, its involvement in anti-terrorism financing efforts post-9/11 revealed that transaction data could be accessed by US authorities under certain legal frameworks. This privacy paradox means that while the Eurodollar system promises freedom from direct regulation, the digital trails left on SWIFT are potentially accessible to powerful governments, raising questions about financial sovereignty for nations and individuals alike. It's a constant tension between security needs and privacy rights. The opacity and lack of a direct lender of last resort for the eurodollar market pose significant risks to global financial stability. The interconnectedness means that a liquidity crunch in one part of the offshore market can quickly propagate, potentially triggering wider financial instability. Policymakers, including former Federal Reserve Chair Ben Bernanke, have acknowledged these vulnerabilities, urging greater international cooperation and regulatory oversight. However, the fragmented nature of global governance makes comprehensive regulation a daunting, if not impossible, task, leaving the system inherently prone to unforeseen shocks. Despite its vulnerabilities and the rising calls for alternatives, the demand for US dollars in the eurodollar market remains stubbornly high. This isn't just inertia, it's a structural demand driven by several factors. A vast majority of global commodities, like oil, are still priced in dollars. International debt, particularly in emerging markets, is often denominated in dollars. This creates a perpetual need for dollar liquidity, forcing countries to either earn dollars through trade or borrow them from the eurodollar market, reinforcing its centrality and the dollar's indispensable role, as per economic reports. For nations attempting to de-dollarize, the challenge is immense. Creating a true alternative requires not just a new currency or messaging system, but a deep, liquid, and trusted financial market comparable to the eurodollar system. This involves developing robust bond markets, a stable legal framework, and confidence among global investors and traders, elements that have taken decades, even centuries, to build around the dollar. While efforts are underway, particularly by China, experts agree that a fundamental shift away from dollar dominance is likely a multi-generational project, not an overnight change. Beyond sanctions, SWIFT also plays a critical, albeit controversial, role in combating global terrorism and illicit finance. After the 9/11 attacks, the U.S. Treasury Department initiated the Terrorist Finance Tracking Program, TFTP, which involved accessing SWIFT data to identify and track terrorist financing networks. This program sparked considerable debate over privacy and sovereignty, particularly in Europe. While many acknowledge the necessity of such tools, the revelation underscored the inherent power of SWIFT data and the US's ability to leverage its position for security objectives, prompting further questions about oversight. The strength of the US dollar, often buoyed by the eurodollar system, can be understood through the dollar smiles theory. This theory suggests the dollar tends to strengthen during two scenarios: periods of extreme global risk aversion, when investors flock to the safety of US assets, like eurodollars, and periods of strong US economic growth, which attracts capital. Conversely, it might weaken during moderate global growth. The eurodollar market often acts as the primary conduit for these flows, amplifying the dollar's reactions to global economic shifts, as theorized by economists. The regulatory landscape for eurodollars has been described by some as a black hole. Because these dollars are held in non-US banks, they fall outside the direct jurisdiction of the US Federal Reserve. While host country central banks may have some oversight, the global nature of eurodollar transactions often means no single authority has complete visibility or control. This lack of comprehensive regulation fosters an environment where risks can accumulate undetected, only to emerge during periods of stress, a concern frequently voiced by economists at organizations like the BIS. Despite eurodollars being offshore and SWIFT being based in Belgium, US law still exerts a powerful, often extraterritorial, influence. This is primarily due to the dollar's central role. Any bank, anywhere in the world, that wishes to deal in US dollars must, at some point, interact with the US financial system, typically through a correspondent bank account in New York. This gives the US Treasury and Justice Department leverage to enforce their regulations, including sanctions, even on foreign entities. This reach is a cornerstone of American financial power. In summary, the eurodollar system and the SWIFT network are not just financial tools, they are the ultimate instruments of geopolitical dominance. Their combined power allows a degree of influence that few military arsenals can match. By controlling access to the world's reserve currency and the messaging system that facilitates its flow, the US holds an unparalleled position to shape global events, enforce its foreign policy, and exert pressure on adversaries. This silent, invisible power dictates who can participate in the global economy, and on what terms, a reality that continuously reshapes international relations. The future of this shadow system is a subject of intense debate. Will the weaponization of the dollar and SWIFT accelerate de-dollarization efforts, eventually eroding U.S. financial power? Or will the sheer inertia and structural advantages of the eurodollar market prove too strong for any meaningful shift in the short to medium term? As global rivalries intensify and new technologies emerge, the dynamics could change. However, for now, this invisible $500 trillion shadow continues to rule the world, dictating the terms of prosperity and power. To fully appreciate the eurodollar's enduring role, we must briefly recall the Bretton Woods system established after World War II. It pegged global currencies to the US dollar, which in turn was convertible to gold. When the US unilaterally ended gold convertibility in 1971, the world essentially moved to a floating exchange rate system. Far from weakening the dollar, this transition, combined with the burgeoning eurodollar market, solidified its position. The dollar became the anchor in a sea of floating currencies, with eurodollars providing the lubricant for global liquidity, according to economic historians. London's emergence as the primary hub for the eurodollar market is no accident. Its established financial infrastructure, regulatory flexibility, and time zone advantages made it ideal. British banks were eager to engage in this profitable, less regulated business, cementing the city's role as a major offshore financial center. This historical context illustrates how existing financial hubs can, with strategic foresight and regulatory agility, become indispensable components of new global systems, further entrenching the power dynamics of international finance, as observed by financial journalists. Paradoxically, the very system that bypasses US regulation also relies on the US as a global risk manager. The stability of the US Treasury market provides the safest haven for vast amounts of global capital, including eurodollars. Furthermore, the Federal Reserve's occasional interventions, like the post-2008 swap lines, underscore its critical role in backstopping the global dollar liquidity. This creates a fascinating dynamic, a market outside US control, yet utterly dependent on US financial stability and, in crises, its central bank's actions, as argued by many economic commentators. Central to both eurodollar flows and SWIFT messages is the correspondent banking network. This is where banks hold accounts with other banks, often in different countries, to facilitate international payments. A foreign bank wanting to make a dollar payment must have a correspondent account with a US bank, typically in New York. This interbank relationship is the real choke point for financial sanctions, giving the US tremendous leverage. Disrupting these correspondent relationships effectively cuts off a bank's ability to clear dollar transactions, a tactic used effectively against sanctioned entities. It's important to distinguish between eurodollars and offshore tax havens, though there's some overlap. While eurodollars enable legitimate global commerce outside US regulation, the same offshore environment can unfortunately be exploited by illicit actors for tax evasion, money laundering, and other criminal activities. Financial watchdogs and investigative journalists have routinely exposed how these parallel financial systems can be co-opted. This duality, facilitating legitimate trade while enabling opacity, is a persistent challenge for global financial governance and public trust. The eurodollar system has a profound impact on emerging markets. Many developing nations rely on dollar-denominated debt and need access to eurodollar liquidity to finance their growth and international trade. Fluctuations in the eurodollar market, particularly tightening liquidity or rising interest rates, can have severe consequences for these economies, leading to currency crises or debt distress. This dependency underscores how the health of this largely unregulated offshore market can dictate the economic fortunes of billions across the globe, a fact often overlooked in developed market analyses. The advent of central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, presents a fascinating new frontier for the eurodollar SWIFT dynamic. If major central banks introduce their own digital currencies, particularly a digital dollar, it could streamline international payments and potentially reduce reliance on traditional correspondent banking and, by extension, SWIFT. However, analysts are divided. Some argue CBDCs could reinforce the dollar's dominance by making it even more efficient, while others suggest they could fragment the system, allowing for direct, peer-to-peer central bank payments that bypass existing power structures. One of the most defining characteristics and criticisms of the Eurodollar system is its fundamental opacity. Unlike onshore banking where regulators have extensive data, the decentralized and cross-jurisdictional nature of Eurodollar transactions makes comprehensive data collection and analysis extremely challenging. This lack of transparency means that systemic risks can build up unseen, creating a fertile ground for speculative bubbles or hidden leverage. As financial researcher Perry Mehrling often emphasizes, understanding who owes what to whom is crucial for stability, and in the Eurodollar market, this remains largely a mystery. The narrative of the $500 trillion shadow system, encompassing the Eurodollar market and SWIFT, reveals an unseen hand of power. This hand is not controlled by a single government or institution but emerges from the complex interplay of market forces, regulatory vacuums, and the enduring dominance of the US dollar. It's a system that facilitates unparalleled global commerce and wealth creation, yet simultaneously grants immense, often unchecked, geopolitical leverage to those who can influence its levers. Its very invisibility makes it more potent, shaping the world from the shadows. So, what lies ahead for this colossal shadow? The forces pushing for decentralization and de-dollarization are growing, driven by geopolitical competition and technological innovation. Yet, the sheer scale, liquidity, and established trust in the Eurodollar SWIFT complex mean its dominance is unlikely to vanish overnight. Instead, we may see a slow, gradual fragmentation, where regional alternatives gain traction, challenging the monolithic dollar-centric system without fully replacing it. Monitoring these subtle shifts will be crucial for understanding the evolving landscape of global power and wealth distribution. Ultimately, the specter of systemic risk will continue to haunt the Eurodollar market. Without a clear regulatory framework or a defined global lender of last resort, the potential for unforeseen shocks remains ever present. The intricate web of interbank lending and derivatives, often unseen by traditional oversight, means that a crisis in one corner could rapidly cascade. As economists frequently remind us, financial innovation, especially in unregulated spaces, often outpaces the capacity for governance, leaving us perpetually navigating a powerful, indispensable, yet inherently fragile shadow system. Understanding these invisible structures is not just an academic exercise, it's essential for comprehending the real forces that shape your financial future, from inflation rates to geopolitical stability. The Eurodollar system and SWIFT are not abstract concepts, but the very real plumbing through which global capitalism operates. Their ongoing evolution, the challenges they face, and the geopolitical battles fought over their control will continue to define the 21st century. Stay informed, stay curious, and keep questioning the systems that silently orchestrate our world.